Jeanette, I appreciate you joining me today. For our viewers, my name's Bruce Davenport and you're Jeanette McDaniel. Let's talk about, I think, one of the most important jobs in the world, parenting.
Parenting.
Right. And let's talk about choices and responsibility and how to influence our children to be responsible. What comes to your mind when we think about that?
The first thing I think about is, what are you doing with your children?
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing with them, or are you doing to them and for them?
So what would be some examples of doing with?
Doing with would be doing something that they enjoy doing and doing it with them, or even taking a walk with them, or cooking with them. Anything that puts forth an effort while being together to accomplish something where the children are enjoying it and you are too.
And how about these other things, doing something for them? Is that good or bad?
Well, it's according to what you want. If you want a dependent child, that will always be dependent upon you to do for them. And then when they leave home, they still contact you, wanting you to do for them, because dependency breeds resentment and hostility when you're not around there to do for them. So do you want, the question you'd ask, do you want this child to be independent and able to carry on without me and have a successful life?
But how about when they are not doing what we want them to do?
Well, it's according to whether you want them to do it more than they want to do it themselves. And it's also according to whether they are feeling important. And there's just a lot of reasoning and questions you could ask them to self-evaluate. But ask yourself, is what I'm about to do or say going to bring me closer to this child or push us apart? Because if it's going to push you apart and you want something more than they do, even if they want it, they won't give it to you, because that will give them more power and recognition, more control over you.
Let's talk about some of these drives that are inside of us, and we've already mentioned that. The importance, number one, of our children feeling like they belong. And that's a drive that is inside of us from birth till death. How important do you think that need to belong is?
Well, I think it's one of the most important of all 5 needs that we're born with, because in order to stay mentally healthy, you have to be connected to someone. And if you're connected, it's important to listen to your children and let them know what they have to say is important to you. And give them the opportunity to share things with you. That'll help them feel like they have some freedom too. And then life will be a lot more fun. And so the need for love and belonging, we all have them, the same need. But some of us have a stronger need for love and belonging than others. So if you as a parent have a high need to be connected and belonging, and your child has maybe a medium need, you're going to want to spend time with them when they'd rather spend that time alone and do other things. But recognizing it's a need that's driving them, you won't take it personal.
How about our need for power?
Well, power breaks up up most relationships.
Mhm.
Do my way or the highway. But when we talk about power, it's power within, not power over. And it's power with. And so that's why when you're spending time with your child and building a good relationship, it helps them to meet that need for
Yeah.
power, or they'll listen to you when you've been listening to them.
What would you say to a parent that says, this is my house and I'm in control and I have power? What would you
Yeah.
s-
I would say to that parent, is what you're doing and saying working for you? Is it getting what you want from the child? Are you moving closer to the child? Are you able to influence and persuade them to do things with that kind of talk? Maybe it'll work sometimes, but it doesn't work all the time.
And I guess what I'm wondering, when we started this conversation talking about responsibility, especially when we send our kids off to school, we're not around them to be able to influence them.
Well, it's very important that we teach children to be responsible for their choices. And the way we can influence that is by having a good relationship and helping them face reality and see if they're going in the right direction of success and a happy life.
Right. I think of teenagers and that high need for freedom, moving from childhood to adulthood. What do you think about this need for freedom?
I think if you stop and think, most wars started in the name of freedom. And a lot of times you can have a war going on at home
Right.
with your child because they have the need of freedom that's driving them, and they're getting at the age where they want more freedom. And there's two different types of freedom: freedom to and freedom from. And let's hope that our children don't choose freedom from us.
Right.
And that when we teach them to be responsible, when they do have freedom, you don't have to sit home and worry about them because you raise them to be responsible children, facing the reality of their choices.
One thing probably children and teenagers do a little better than we adults is having fun. But as a parent though, what do we need to remember
Well,
about this need
there's
for
many
fun?
ways that you can meet your need for fun. And we like to talk about the more you can make learning fun, the more the child's going to learn. And the more you can have fun with your child, the closer you're going to be and the more influence you're going to have with them to help them make good choices.
And our final need for survival.
Well, we're all born with the need for survival, but again, those needs are different levels. And how could you tell if someone had a high need for survival or just a medium need? You take a look at, for myself, I have a medium need because I take a lot of risks. I am scared of heights, but I still go up in hot air balloons and climb bridges and do a lot of things just because it looks like it's fun,
Right.
but it really is a threat to your survival to take this kind of risk. Also, a person with a high need for survival will save their money, since I have a medium need for freedom. If I make it, I spend it.
Right.
Because survival is also security. So when we talk about survival, we think it's just a house and food to eat, and etc. But it really is the security.
And I also think of feeling safe.
Feeling safe. But also now there's something in there with that survival need. They have an urge when they get a certain age
Oh, right,
to
absolutely.
reproduce.
Oh, yeah.
And so that need might be driving them when they get to be teenagers.
Right. So as we think about meeting these needs, what are some good questions as parents to ask ourselves when we think about these needs in dealing with our kids?
I think some questions that's probably the most important is, what do I want with this child? What is my picture that I have in my head of this child in the future? Do I want them to be dependent or independent? Do I want them to obey everything I say or think for themselves? Do I want them to be the one that evaluates their behavior, or do I want to be the one that has them self-evaluate their behaviors when I'm not around? And to ask ourselves, is what I'm about to do or say to this child going to bring me closer to getting what I want,
Right.
or is it going to push me further away?
Yeah. I'm also thinking the challenges of many parents of sometimes being a single parent, which comes to my mind, and also this would be married couples too. Are you taking care of yourself? How important is that as a parent?
Well, the more you take care of yourself, and if you ride in an airplane, you'll hear them say, put the mask on yourself first if you lose oxygen in the cabin. So you'll be able to put the mask on the child.
Right.
So if you don't take care of yourself, ask yourself, is what I'm doing going to help me to be around longer to help this child? Or are they going to have to be helping me?
Right.
So looking at the importance, recognizing you have the same needs as this child.
Right.
But that power need breaks up most relationships.
Right. Okay, well, I appreciate your time, Jeanette, and hopefully this is helpful to parents to be aware of their children's needs and how they can help them meet them themselves, and also making sure the parents take care of their own needs. Thank you. Jeanette, thanks for joining us again. Let's see if it would be helpful for parents to understand a little tool that you and I have found very helpful in our own life, and especially dealing with children or teenagers, our little behavioral car. What would be something we could start with? We basically, in our first session, covered what we consider those basic needs, which is what drives us, so we can call that our engine. Okay? And we all have these same needs, but yet sometimes you want to drive down one road and your child wants to drive down a different road. What can you tell us about that, where that would be helpful, Jeanette?
Well, we use a car as an analogy of behavior because the parents, and I'm sure that there's parents watching this video that have said many times, that child is driving me up the wall. They're driving me crazy, driving me to my grave. Well, no one drives you anyplace.
Right.
We each have our own behaviors, and we choose to behave to get something we want. Well, the person in the other behavioral car is driving to get something they want, to meet those basic needs. And so sometimes you can be in a real conflict with your child because you have a different picture in your head of what you want at the time. But have you also thought about how people, you want to go on a vacation someplace and you want to go to the mountains and the children want to go to the beach. And the behaviors that you choose, you might want to ask yourself the question, Am I blaming and complaining and criticizing and nagging and threatening and punishing to control? Or am I listening and supporting and negotiating some of the habits that you use that you want the child to use later in life? Because they're learning from you what
Right.
works. And helping to discover and sharing your own pictures and then negotiating. And helping yourselves to drive down Happy Highway with
Right.
your behavioral car instead of Miserabling Highway. Or a lot of kids turn to Pleasure Highway with drugs and unloving sex and violence. But we're trying to get them to drive down the Happy Highway where they're self-disciplined and they're facing responsibilities. And they're listening to what you have to say. And if you can help them see the usefulness of what you want for them and for yourself, to where they will feel better if they choose to do what you've asked them to do, then you're more likely to get them over on the highway of life that you want them on.
So are you saying, Jeanette, that we really can't drive someone else's car? Or have we ever heard parents say, I can control my child?
Well, when you think you're controlling your child, you might take a look at how's it working for you. Are you controlling them, or are you helping them to see the usefulness
Right.
of doing what you're asking them to do? Do you have a good enough relationship with them that they trust you enough to know your way might be the right way?
Right.
You can only influence and persuade people to do things. If we ever discover a way to make people do things, this world would be wonderful.
Right, right. And I guess in thinking about our car, there's no way right now I could control what you think. Physically, I might be able to control where you are, but, and especially with a child, but really, is that the kind of relationship we want to have?
You want a relationship with a child when you're talking to them, you know they're listening. And hopefully they're not saying blah, 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 blah while you're talking.
Right.
But they're truly listening.
Yeah. Or getting the eye roll is a common,
They have any
common
way
gesture. Right.
telling you, back off.
Mhm.
But then again, think about it. Where did they learn some of those behaviors?
Right. How about in dealing with differences? Because we all have differences, but especially teenagers and their parents.
Well, the differences come from we all live in our own perceived world. As we perceive it through the information that we have in our head, the knowledge we have, helps us to perceive things in our own way. No one ever perceives things the same way. You might think they do, but they don't. So all we can ever give our children, and all they can ever give us, is the information. What your children choose to do with that information is their choice. That's why we talk about choices and how sometimes we make bad choices. But we hopefully will understand that you can't change the past. And when you look at this little car, if you're looking in your rear view mirror all the time at the past, what's going to happen to your car?
You're going to have a wreck.
You're going to have a wreck. And have you ever heard a parent say, I am a wreck?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I guess that brings us to another topic that we've talked about a little bit, is how we see things, our windshield. What's an important question as parents to ask ourselves about our windshield and how we see things?
Well, as we're driving down the road of life, we look through our windshield at what's out there. And if you have someone else in the car with you, they never see what you're looking at exactly. They're looking at something else. But then along comes a truck and slings mud on your windshield where everything is sort of muddy. Well, rather than choose to anger at what just happened, turn on your windshield wipers and wash it off.
Right.
And you'll be much safer in that behavioral car riding down the road.
So what would be a good question for our parents to ask their children when there's a difference of perception?
Mhm. Ask them if they're willing to listen to you for 5 minutes, and you'll listen to them for 5 minutes, and you'll ask yourself, what do you want? And I'll share with you what I want, and we'll see if we can negotiate our differences where each of us will get something where we will feel better. And that's what we're always behaving to do, is feel better, to meet one of those needs. But that power need breaks up most relationships,
Right. Wanting to feel important.
wanting to feel important.
Another thing we have on the roof of the car is facing reality.
Mhm.
And I guess one of the things we're asking parents to face the reality of, I really can't control what my child does and thinks, and especially when they're not around. What are some other ways that we need to face reality as a parent?
Face the reality that they're not seeing through their windshield what you're seeing, and that they do not have the same picture in their head of what they want that you want, and help them see the usefulness of changing directions and give them enough information where they can possibly see things your way and cooperate more.
Okay, well, this is an introduction to our car, and later on we'll discuss more of the parts of the car, and hopefully this will be a useful and simple tool for parents to use. Thank you. Jeanette, in this session, why don't we continue understanding our little tool to use? And I think this is one of the most important and valuable concepts of understanding the wheels of our car, when we call it our behavioral car. What can you tell us about the direction of our car is controlled by which wheels?
The front two wheels,
Okay.
we have total control of the way we choose to act, and we have most control over thinking, but sometimes we think that we don't have control over some of those thoughts, but it's because we're not aware of our thinking. So helping people become aware of what you're thinking and how you're choosing to act at this time. And the back two wheels is just giving you signals that you're turning in the wrong direction or the right direction, and that you're headed down an unhappy highway because you're focusing on how you feel.
Right. And the feeling is one of the back wheels.
The feeling is
Right.
the back wheel.
And then I have the body, signals from our body as the other, which is also our physiology on the other back wheel.
It's kind of like those two back wheels are the signals in our life. Like a real car, you get red lights on your dash, and we do something. We take it in for a checkup. But it seems like in our lives, when we get a signal from our feeling in our body, we'll take a pill to knock out the
Right.
signal.
Right.
And we want people to become aware that they have control indirectly of their back wheel by changing their thinking and acting.
Let's apply this. Let's say I'm a parent of a teenager, and it's my teenager's not home, the past curfew, couple of behaviors I could think of would be angering or worrying. So help me understand that in terms of the wheels of the car.
Well, you stop and think at the time, if your child is not home, what are some of the things you're thinking?
Are they safe?
Okay? And how are you acting at the time?
Well, I'd be pacing the floor.
Okay. And are you worried about the past, the present, or the future?
Well, in that I would be worried they're not here. Would that be the future or the past? I mean, I'm worried they're not home. They're supposed to be here right now.
And when you say they're supposed to be right now, what was the plan
Yeah.
that you made before they left?
Well, for them to be on time.
And did you ask them before they left what might be a roadblock that would get in their way to keep them from getting there on time?
No.
If you had asked them, might that have helped them
Mm-hmm.
to have been more specific with their plan? And what's some other things you've been thinking you're gonna say or do when they get home?
Well, possibly saying some things that I might regret, but, you know, why didn't you call? Or,
And how would it help you to focus on the whys and the past?
no, it certainly wouldn't.
So what could you focus on that might be better than bring you closer
Yeah.
to your child, where they would choose to make a specific plan and follow through on it?
Well, certainly, I'm glad you're here. But let's continue to focus. Let's say while the teenager is still gone, you know, help us understand a better choice than worrying.
Okay. What's some of the things that you've done?
Well, I would certainly make an attempt to contact if it was, you know, if I thought that would work, is make a phone call myself.
What else?
Well, I could focus on my child is responsible, and for some reason, you know, it'll work out.
So what you need at that time is more information. And that's all we can ever get or give is information. And what we choose to do with that information is our choice. Why do you think children lie to you?
Because they're fearful.
And if they told you the truth, would you help them or hurt them?
Right, that's a good question to ask. And I guess the reason they would lie is they're afraid of being hurt.
So suppose when the children do get there, while you're waiting on them, you can think of all of the things you might say to them that would bring you closer in your relationship, where you can influence them or persuade them to be truthful,
Right.
make a specific plan, and if they fail to get there on time, to call you or have someone else call you. If you did that, would that bring you closer or push you apart?
Absolutely bring us closer.
And would that eliminate some of your fears and stress?
For certain, next time.
And when you are stressing and anxiety, being anxious over your child, is it helping you to be healthier, more relaxed? Or what kind of signals are you getting from your body?
Yeah, I'd be getting some very bad signals.
And what would those signals be
Yeah.
telling you? Would it be telling you to stop and give yourself a checkup to see if you were having stinking thinking?
Right. Now, would this in any way communicate that I don't care about my child? Because I think that's what some people might say. If you're not worried, you don't care.
Mhm. Well, how much you let the child know you do care when they come home?
Yeah. Well, tell them.
And how would you say that? What would you
Yeah.
say to them?
Well, I'm concerned. I love you very much. And when you're not here on time, I'd really like to know.
And would it help you to say, I'm not interested in fault, I'm
Mhm.
interested in solutions?
Right.
So how can we solve this by talking things over and working it out?
Right.
It sounds a little tedious, doesn't it?
Right.
But isn't it just a wee bit tedious,
Mhm.
what you're doing now?
Right.
Mm.
If you compare the trouble,
Are you willing to change, or are you so set on changing somebody else?
right. It's better for the parent to focus on changing themselves.
Can you make those children do anything, or
Yeah.
can you just influence them and persuade them?
Right. The influence and persuade, for
Okay.
sure. That's a
So,
hard lesson to learn.
so would you kind of summarize what we just said about the front two wheels and the back
Okay.
two wheels, and the importance of
Yeah.
understanding
Mhm.
that it's a behavioral car
Right.
explaining our behavior?
Right. Well, it's obvious our behavioral car always has four wheels on it. It can't just have one. I can't just think something and avoid acting
Mhm.
or avoid a feeling or avoid a signal from my body. So it always has four wheels. And in our real cars that we drive on the road, the front wheels always control the direction. So my acting and thinking is always controlling my direction. And my body signals and my feelings give me a hint whether I'm driving on a good road or a bad road.
So if you were driving your real car
Mhm.
and you had too much air in those back tires, or you had too little of air, what kind of ride would you be
Yeah.
having? Pretty
It could be a bumpy ride.
bumpy ride.
Yeah.
Mhm. And if your tires are getting more and more inflated, what might they do? Blow out.
Right.
So that's why we use a car
Yeah.
as an analogy in total behavior, to help people understand.
Right.
Nobody drives you up the wall, or drives you crazy, or drives you in.
Right.
You choose to think and act in a way
Right.
that takes you in whatever direction, and it really does affect your physiology and feelings.
And I really like to finish up that last analogy that we've used. I'm only going to be disturbed if I give you the keys to my car and let you control me.
Because of the behavior I'm choosing, it gives me a lot of power over you.
Right.
If you want me home more than I want to be home, and we don't have a good relationship,
Right.
I know I can push your button and start your car
Right.
in a direction
Mhm.
that there's a lot more pain
Right.
than pleasure.
And that initially can be very satisfying
Mhm.
to try to control somebody else when they control us.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Jeanette.
Anytime.
Okay. Jeanette, I know there are a lot of important parts to our behavioral car, but I'm thinking one of the most important parts is that windshield, and you call it perception.
Mhm.
So what does that mean when we talk about perception and how we see things?
It's one of the most important things about choice theory, the understanding, especially if you have a classroom. In that classroom, if you have 32 students or you have two, there's no two people that have the same perceived world. The reason they don't perceive things the same is they don't have enough information.
And this could be true in our family,
Mhm.
especially if you have more than one child.
That's right.
And I guess also true for the parents.
Mhm.
we have a mother and father, and they would perceive things differently.
And we want other people to perceive things the way we do.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't, we want to hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
We want to blame and complain and criticize and nag and
Mhm.
threaten and punish them
Right.
until they see things the way we see
Right.
it. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And as we filter things through what we already know, think of a limited amount of knowledge some of our students or teachers have about things,
Mm-hmm.
the limited amount of knowledge we have.
Mm-hmm.
But we want people to learn quickly what we know when they don't have the tools.
So what would be some examples for our parents to understand about perception?
Well, one of the things that might help is to understand that we've had experiences with situations
Mm-hmm.
where we are fearful for our children's safety,
Mm-hmm.
but they haven't had those
Right.
experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and we want them to be aware of things and perceive it the way we do,
Mm-hmm.
and we get very frustrated when they don't.
Right.
But if you understand all they need is more information,
Mm-hmm.
and often you can get more information by asking,
Mm-hmm.
what do you know right now, or how do you perceive this? And from your point of view, you may be right,
Mm-hmm.
but from my point of view, I may be right too. So I'll listen to you
Mm-hmm.
if you listen to me, and when we get more information,
Right.
might bring us closer
Mm-hmm.
to the same perception about a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Our perceived world, we see things as negative,
Mm-hmm.
positive, and neutral.
Yeah.
And if a person sees things neutral, they're not going to do much about it. But if we see them negatively,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to try to change it.
Right.
We're going to try to change someone else's perception from negative to positive. And it's not going to happen.
Right.
But we might be able to influence them or persuade them to talk it over and to listen to each other and see if we can get closer to the same perceptions about a situation. We filter it through our 5 senses: hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, and what's the other one? Did I name 5?
Hearing, tasting,
Touching
touching, smelling,
Smelling.
and seeing.
and seeing. Which one of those do you think we use the most out there in the world to build our perception?
Would you say our seeing?
Seeing, our sight.
Mm-hmm.
So you see a student or you see your child doing something, and you perceive that what they're doing is wrong. And then you get more information and you think, oh, what a nice thing
Right.
to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So asking a person right now, what are you thinking? And how are you choosing to act? And what is it that you want? And how do you see me helping you? And I've got more information about this
Mhm.
if you're interested in
Yeah.
hearing it.
Right.
That might change your perception. Are you open to it?
Mm-hmm. But we're so quick to judge as adults sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and then we create some separation when we make judgments before we have all the information
That's
that
right.
we need.
So the more of those senses you can use in getting more information,
Mhm.
the more it'll change your perception.
Is there anything else that would be helpful for parents to understand when they're dealing with difficult situations with their teens?
The best thing in the world they can do is build a good relationship
Mhm.
and listen and ask for more information and truly let them know
Right.
you are interested and that you do care,
Right.
and give up all of those negative, disconnecting
Right.
habits and start trusting
Right.
and accepting and listening and negotiating and cooperating and supporting. And you'll see a tremendous change. When you change, the people around you change.
I think it's important to remember also to be aware of our perceptions, and also to be aware that as humans we sort of have a tendency to be negative. And this is helpful to us to help us survive, but it's harmful to us when we let that negativity override us and continue to think negative things.
And that's why when we talk to anyone, don't tell them what you don't want. Tell them what you do want. And the thing I use often, don't slam the door. You can bet they're going to slam the door because they didn't hear the don't. But tell them what you really want.
Yeah.
Close the door quietly. So that will help a lot in telling people what you really want and negotiating with them what they want and see if you can compromise. But always with the idea, together we can work out any problem without anyone choosing to hurt.
Well, I see this as being, and I perceive this as being very helpful.
Thank you. It's helped me.